Okay. Uh, is it visible? I think it should be. All right, good. Okay, so welcome all of you who are in this meeting. I hope more people will join soon. So today we're going to talk about Flutter versus Xamarin. Now it's by me and Josh, and just a second. And yeah, so I am a Microsoft student partner from the April cohort, and I'm also a member of Flutter Kolkata. This is logo is wrong. This is a GDG logo, but yeah, I'm a member of Flutter Kolkata. And yeah, Josh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Josh. I am a Microsoft Lean partner from Kenya, and I'm a member of the .NET Foundation. Yeah,
Okay, awesome. So let me start with Flutter, and then we can move on to talking about Xamarin, or like we can mix it up in the middle. And like I want to start with what is Flutter and like a very introduction to Flutter and why and how it's useful. Because since Xamarin is something which is pretty mature in the market. So since Flutter is pretty new, it's not really very obvious that everyone should know it or like knows it right as of now. So I'm going to start with the introduction, and then we are going to move on gradually to the bits and pieces, the new releases, and how it's better or like how it's competing in the market. And then Josh will talk about Xamarin. So let's begin. So Flutter actually came out on 2017 May, but most of you may know that it came out on like it got its first release on 2018. So not a lot of people know that it like came out on 2017. People think that it came out on 2018, but it actually came out on 2017, and it got its first stable release on December 2018. So like in the starting 2000 of in the starting of 2019, people started using Flutter a lot, and the more and more people adopted to Flutter, the community grew more and more. So what is Flutter? It's basically an open source multi-platform mobile development SDK, and it's based on Dart, and it has its inspiration on React. Now you might have heard that there's this comparison going on quite a lot with Flutter and React Native. Now that is very eminent because it actually takes quite a lot of the inspiration from React. So coming from the React world, people from the because React already has a as open source, like React already has a cross-platform React Native, which is if you see, there are a lot of comparisons going on because they are in somewhat similar, but in most cases different. So that's why there's a lot of comparison between them. But today we're going to talk about Xamarin, which is a little different, but then also you can map the differences between them. So it's first thing, it's open source, so anyone can go there and like contribute, and you can make the SDK better for people to use. And it also uses Dart behind the hood, so like everything is built on top of Dart. So Dart is also by Google, and Dart is something which I really like because we're going to talk about that in a few slides later. But Dart actually takes the best from all the different languages. So like it takes from TypeScript, it takes from JavaScript, and it's very JavaScriptish, but at the same time very type safe. So it's something pretty amazing. That is maybe one of the reasons Google chose it, and the second reason is I think being Google's language also played a part, since Flutter is also by Google. But yeah, so that's what Flutter is. It's an open source multi-platform SDK. So you can basically run code for both Android and iOS. Like you can write in a single code base, and that application will run on both Android and iOS. So that's why it's cross-platform. So since it's open source, you can go to this URL, which is github.com Flutter, and you would be redirected to this repository, which is the official repository of Flutter. And it's also maintained by Google quite a lot. The Flutter team is doing pretty amazing things. And like earlier, I remember when I used to play around with Flutter in 2019, I used to get alpha and pre-alpha releases every single day. So they worked pretty hard. And recently, Flutter got updated. It's now in 1.17, Flutter 1.17, and also Dart got updated. So right now the stable version of Dart is 2.8, and both of them, I can say that the Dart compiler and the Dart language is not exactly almost bug free. That is hypothetical, but yeah, it is somewhat very resilient. So you can actually do a lot of amazing and type safe checks on the new Dart. It has something called null safety, which is also in this slide. But yeah, so it's sort of bug free, but not exactly. I find it very much bug free and very easy to use. Also, the Flutter team resolved around 6,000 issues. So you can also take a look at that, because like if you resolve 6,000 issues, which was previously on the repository, you can actually compare how many new changes have been there in the recent Flutter 1.17. So yeah, what Flutter does is actually creates apps for, you can create apps for Android and iOS both. Now for Android, you have something called as Material, and for iOS, you have Cupertino. So these are like the theme. These are like the packages which on top of which you can create these applications. So Material will give you widgets and components which are Android based. So like if you have ever used both devices, Android and iOS, you would see the slider is a little different for Android, and the slider is a little different for iOS as well. So if you use Cupertino, then you would get the iOS slider. If you use Material, you'll get the Android slider. So that's how and why we use these different packages. If there's also something called as a platform widget, which can actually make which you can use and to make a check whether which platform you're writing the application for, and then you can render the components according to your wish. So yeah, it actually does. You can use it actually does native calls and uses platform channels and message passing. So that's why it's very native. So it's actually not native, but it will feel very native. And this is generally the main file structure which you follow in Flutter. So once you create any Flutter project using Flutter create, you would get this file structure. You have an Android iOS. Lib is where most of the files in Flutter is stored. And everything in Flutter is a .dart extension. So by default, the go-to location is main.dart. After that, you can create your own files and you can just store in the lib folder. Anything outside lib, you won't be able to access. So keep that in mind. So it's like a source in React. And for tests, yeah, you have a test folder, and there's a README as well as pubspec. So pubspec is like package.json. So if you have ever done web dev, you would know about package.json. If you haven't, then package.json is where all the dependencies and everything are managed. So in pubspec as well, you can create dev dependencies, normal dependencies, and you also in Flutter there's also something like if you want to use some assets or something, you have to actually add them in pubspec first. So you have to tell them the location of your asset, and then only you can use it in your project. So this is how the general Dart structure looks like. So this is like Flutter incorporated in Dart. So everything is Flutter is a widget. So you have to first build the widget. So in order to do that, you have a widget build method, and like you can return a scaffold, which is also a widget. App bar is also a widget. Column, like hero image, everything is a widget. So everything in Flutter is a widget, and is it performant? Yes, it is very performant. The reason why it is performant is because of this, the bridge, which is a concept. I think Josh can also talk about it a bit later, but like the bridge is something which like when you create a request or something, like when you, because it's not a native application, when you do some changes in your application, or when you recreate or rebuild something, it has to go to and fro the native options. Like for example, if you change a canvas, or if you render a text, or render a particular tree element inside of your application, that will have to first tell the native compiler that okay, this has changed, so you need to render it. So the native compiler will render it and give it back to you. So that's why if you're writing for Android, for example, you rebuild some component. The component building goes to the Android native application. It compiles there and it sends everything back. So there's a two-way communication. That is what you call as the bridge. That's why you have a compare update in the bridge. So whatever you're doing in the platform, it goes back to the native platforms, and then it sends it back to the app. So it causes some performance issues, which is why if you take a look at Flutter, it doesn't do it. It has its own engine, basically, which is Skia. And I believe Xamarin also has Mono, if I'm not wrong. So Flutter has Skia, and it does all the rendering, and everything goes on inside Skia. So you don't need to do that platform going to and fro the platform. So if you update or rebuild a widget, it rebuilds only on Skia itself. So everything happens within the engine, so you don't need to go outside of your scope. So that's why it's much more performant. And also Flutter uses a concept called widget tree. So everything you build in Flutter, like the individual components are built in the form of a tree, and they are mapped to something called as an element tree. So like if you render one element, if you change something which is a child to that particular element, then you don't need to render that parent again. Like if you, for example, if you have a container and you have a text inside of the container and it says hello world, if you change the hello world to hello you, then the component won't render. Only the text, which is the child of the container, will re-render. So that's why you don't need to render the entire tree, which is why it is much more faster than normal Android or iOS native code. Now, this is what I was talking about when I was referring to containers. So like in this example itself, you have the whole thing is a container, like a column. Inside of it, you have a text, which is the strawberry or whatever, and then you have another text, and then you have the stars and 170 review. Now, they individually are wrapped in a row, and those individual stars and 170 reviews can again be a component in itself. And then again, if you look down, you will have another one which is also a row, and then you can like stack it up in the form of a column. Like you can have an icon, you can have the prep text, and you can have 25 minutes as a text. So yeah, that's how you basically work with Flutter. And like if you take a look at the right side example, you would see that there's an icon and a row and a row. So instead of a row, you could have also like wrapped the entire thing in a text. That would work as well. So everything in this page, in this slide is a widget. So like column is a widget, text is a widget, icon is a widget. So in Flutter, everything you work on is a widget. So that's why when you render, it always checks that which widget is the parent and which is the child. And if the parent is not touched or not modified, then it won't render. So you will only render that part which you're changing, and that's why it offers hot reloading as well. So that's why you get so much of performance boost when you use Flutter. Now let's talk about the new features and releases. So recently with Flutter 1.17, you also get CodePen support, which is really amazing. Like earlier, you didn't get this much flexibility with Flutter, but recently Flutter is growing so much. You get CodePen support as well now. So like you can create your small components, share it, and like earlier it had Dartpad. You can it was a little difficult sharing things in Dartpad. I wouldn't say it wasn't possible to do that. It was possible, but there's a lot of steps that used to go through in order to do that. But now with CodePen, if you have used CodePen, you would know how easy and simple it is to like embed it into your blogs or like share it anywhere. And also like when you're building some application or like recreating some widget, CodePen will automatically rebuild your app simultaneously on the right side on your canvas, basically. So yeah, that's a pretty cool update. Other than that, there's this null safety feature which Dart also updated. Now, what this null safety does is it's actually inspired by TypeScript. So like earlier, you can send back or like you can return null. So maybe, for example, if you have ever done the, what do you call that? Exit. So when you do the exit function, so if you write exit 0, it used to like terminate and not do anything. Like you would get null and everything is done, everything is finished. But now with the null safety feature, if you do an exit 0, you would get a void. So like you won't be returned a null or something like earlier, previously, whatever component used to return null, you won't get null anymore. You would get a void or empty or a future of void or something which is not null. So it's pretty important that you like with this change as well, everything has to be modified, and it's also like hectic for a few people because like if for example I have created an app which is using some null based concept, like which is using some null based operation, I have to migrate my code back so that it doesn't use null anymore. So yeah, that's something which is shifting, but with the latest that you get these kind of a good type checks. So yeah, that's pretty great, and that's what you get with Flutter. That's like a very basic overview, and in this session as well, we'll be building a small application with Flutter and also with Xamarin and like do a hand-in-hand comparison. So yeah, Josh, you can go ahead. Josh.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Will you go through the demo? Then once you finish your demo, we start on Xamarin.
Yeah, we can do that, definitely. Okay, sure. So let me stop sharing this, and I will be opening VS Code. Okay, so I think my VS Code is visible. So this is like the folder which I created, and this will be, don't worry about it. I'll be getting to the very basics of Flutter. So if somebody is unaware of what is going on, they will be knowing it as well. So it's not very daunting to people who don't know Flutter. So this is a project I created, demo gallery. I haven't done anything, it's just boilerplate inside, and I'll be creating the application inside of it right now. So in order to actually create an application in Flutter, what you need to do is write Flutter, create, and the name of the application. So I've already done it. So the name of my application is demo gallery. So that when I ran it, it created this. Now I've already done it because it takes a little bit of time when you do this, and also for the first run, when you run it for the first time, it'll also take a little bit of time. That's why I prefer doing it before. So like if you create it, you will get this run, which is like a new feature in VS Code. Like you can actually run the emulator right from here. If you don't want to do it, you can also do Flutter emulator minus minus launch, and then the name of your emulator, whatever it is. If you want to see the emulators available, you can do Flutter emulators, and you would get a list of all the emulators. So these are the two emulators I have, Phone and Pixel 2. So I'm not going to do the emulator thing from here. I'm just going to use the run command. It's easier that way. But before I run anything, like I already talked about the file structure. So you have Android, build, iOS, and test. And the pubspec YAML, if you take a look at it, is basically contains a list of dependencies and dev dependencies, or if any assets is there which you're using. So all of that, like fonts or icons, everything goes in pubspec. Right. So that's all. In the lib, you find the main dot, which is like the index.js. Basically, it's like a source from where the application development starts, from where your application is going to pick up everything. So right now, it's having some boilerplate code. I'll be removing most of it. So let me go ahead and remove this whole my homepage class, which I don't think we needed. So I'll just remove everything, and it'll complain because it doesn't have a my homepage right now. I will delete things. Okay. So right now what this application is doing is it's a main application. Like this is like void main. So this is the main file which your application looks for, and anything you call from here will be like branching out. So like everything is like you can create a home page. So this is like the home of your application. So once your application starts from this point, it'll look for the home, which is the default go-to location for this. So it'll go. So this is another widget, by the way. This is like a class, which is a stateless widget. This I will create a stateful widget. So it'll look for a widget, which is the home, and then it'll render that widget. So inside of that widget, I can create more widgets, which I want to see in my application. So what I can do is instead of home, I can create maybe gallery. So I can do gallery, and I don't want to give it any params, so I'll just not use anything. So I can just create a class, or like I can create a stateful widget. Basically, SDF will create it, and I can say gallery. And there you go. So this error is, the IntelliSense error is not there anymore because I am already rendering a class which is called gallery. And this class extends a stateful widget. So what is the meaning of a stateful widget is when you are creating a widget which will manipulate some kind of a state or have some state changes, you use a stateful widget. If you have no state changes, or if you're not playing around with any kind of state, then you use a stateless widget. So that's like a basic gist of what it is. Other than that, I will be copy pasting a list of images. Now, let me do that here, and I'll talk about why I did it. So these are the different list of images. They are taken from Unsplash. So these are the images. If you take a look at the repository, basically, you would find that there are certain images. So these images, it can be assets. It can be your personal images, or like whatever you want to give in the form of an asset as well from the package JSON. You can try and do that. Like from the pubspec YAML, you can try and do that. But I will be rendering these images from the internet. So these are the links to those images. All right. After this, I will be returning a scaffold. Now, what is a scaffold? Scaffold is basically a wrapper to your entire application. So your scaffold can have certain layouts. It's like the main wrapper which you get in an application. So I can create a body inside of a scaffold, which let me just do a container for now and show you what happens. So if I do a container and create a child, which is a text, and just say hello, save it and run this, maybe it takes a little bit of time for the first build to happen. While that happens, I'll be explaining you why I did that. Okay, so it generally takes a little bit of time to run the emulator for the first time. And also, you may notice that I'm using VS Code and not Android Studio, although I could have run Android Studio, run the same thing in Android Studio. The reason I'm doing it because Android Studio tends to get heat up quite a lot, and I don't, my laptop is low end, so I can't afford too much heat up when I'm running Teams and everything. So I generally try and do everything in VS Code since it's lightweight, and whenever I just need an emulator and I just need to click on run, that's it. But with Android Studio, since like it provides a lot of other stuff, refactoring and everything, it's like a full-fledged IDE, so it sometimes gets pretty heated up. So that's why I prefer Visual Studio, and you can also run your Flutter code in Visual Studio. It's not limited. Right. So once this builds, what will happen is, since everything is wrapped in a scaffold, you would be able to see there's a container, and you would find an app bar basically. So there's something called as a safe area. With phones having notch these days, there's a certain problem that if you design your application in such a way that you're like in this one. So like if your phone had a notch, the home page will overlap, or you might not know what will happen to your design when it like overlaps with the notch. So with safe area, the notch problem is actually resolved. So you can have actually a bit of padding from the top where the notch is not being like messed around with. That's why there's something called as a safe area. Like when this renders, you would find that the whole scaffold is wrapped around in a single container. So right now, since there's nothing else, the whole body is a single container. Everything will be taken up. The container will take up the whole space, and it will render hello. It'll just say hello. So yeah, the app has built. It's installing the build currently, and it takes a little bit of time. And there's like a waiting period for the first build, but after it's done, you can just, there's this icon, the thunder one, which is hot reload. So like if you make any changes, you can just click on this and it'll just swiftly reload everything. So once this is done, I can see hello. Okay, so there you can see a hello at the very top, but it's not quite visible. And the reason is I do not have any app bar or anything. So that's why it's giving me that problem. So I need an app bar, I believe. Okay, so I can just create an app bar right here and call it app bar. And the app bar can have a child of text. What should I call it? Let's just give it a title. And I can call it okay. The method is not defined. Why is it? Okay, so it's not detecting an app bar. Uh, Let me try and okay. So I can give it a title and have it call it a text of gallery, maybe, and yeah, just save it. And if I do a hot reload, it should be fine. Yeah, there you go. And now you have a gallery. So yeah, so now you have a gallery, and that's how you create app bars, you can change the colors and you can do a lot more. So like if you want, there's an option called style. With style you get a text style, and you can basically change the font size, or let me change the color. So I can do color and then colors dot black maybe, and then the whole thing will change into black. So right now if you see that I'm just saving it and everything is hot reloading it automatically on the right side. So that's what I like about Flutter. It's very easy to use, and like you don't have to reload it again and again. It'll automatically do stuff for you. But if for any purpose you get stuck, you can just click on this one, restart. So it'll hot restart your application and build all the widget trees again. So yeah, right now this is what is the current state of the application. I'm going to create a save area so that the notch problem is resolved by this. And I'm also going to create a padding. So I'm going to create a padding from all sides. Basically, I want a symmetric padding. So like, let me just type and talk at the same time. I can do an edge incest, not all, but symmetric. So it's like when you give a margin from top and bottom and left and right together, not individually. So that's the same thing. So you can give a vertical padding of, I can give 18.0 and also a horizontal padding of 12.0. So what this means is, let's just save it. It should, yeah. So vertical padding of 18 from top and bottom, and horizontal padding of 12 from left and right simultaneously. So right now you can't see anything. So I will just be rendering another widget inside of it, which will be a column widget, which you just saw in the slides itself. So a column widget takes children actually, but also I want to give it a property which is called cross-axis alignment. So I want the cross-axis alignment start, which means I want things to start from the very top and not in the middle or the center or bottom. So cross-axis alignment or start is, I want this column to start from the very top. Inside of the children, I can create as many widgets as I want. So I can give it a text maybe and call it my gallery. Yeah, so if I do this, you would see that my gallery is right here at the very top and not at the center or any other place. So my gallery is one widget. I want to give it some kind of a styling, so I can just say text style, and the style will be, I want it to have a certain font size, which maybe 32. So it should be a little bit bigger, yeah. And the font weight, I can make it bold. So you can't just type bold, you have to type font weight dot bold. These are like syntactic sugar, which you'll get used to once you like start building Flutter apps. Now there's a container, like a widget called a size box. So like this is a widget which you generally use to give a certain height. So I can give it a height of 8. Like let me just not give it right now and create another text field and just say check this and like save it. So everything is right beneath it and there's no spacing or like no heights, like no gap. So if I add this, you'll see that there's a gap. So that's why we use sizebox to provide gaps and like spacing. Now I want to create a text field. I want to create a search field basically. So I will be adding a decoration. It will be an input decoration. So this is like I'm creating a, like in forms, generally you have this input decoration, you create a form field, so that I'm creating an, like a text field. So the input decoration I want is, I want to add a prefix icon basically. So what prefix icon is before writing anything, there will be an icon right at the front. So a prefix icon with icons. Why can't I type today? Icons are search. Yeah, icons are search, and you have color. Let me give it a color of black. Color start black. And there'll be a text field right now. Oh, I haven't closed it. There'll be a text field right now. Yeah, with an icon at the very front. Now it still doesn't look very appealing to me, so I can give it a placeholder basically, and okay, it should be inside of this. The hint text will say that you can search images in this one, and there you go. You have a placeholder right now, and you see how simple it is to like create a Flutter app. You just need to add these properties, and it will automatically detect and rebuild. So there's this widget called outline input border. So what it does, it will give me a border beside with like an outline around the whole search text field. So I can give it a border radius, and the border radius will be circular of 8. So like what I'm telling is, have a border radius with a border radius of 8, and it should be circular. So let me do some prettier formatting. Yeah. So right now everything is well and good. I will be adding the size box again because of spacing, and yeah. So now is the part where we actually build the this images, where we render the images, and we already have the images, a link of the images at the top. There's a list, but right now we want to create those images using a package. So that package is actually called Flutter staggered grid view, and there it is. So this package actually helps you create these sort of a layout. Josh will be creating the gallery in a very grid view format. I thought it's better like we create something not like this, but in a very fancy way. So it'll look something like this. So to do that, you need to install this dependency. You can also do it with grid view, but you'd require a lot more code than you normally would with this dependency. So that's why Flutter is so cool, that you have all these different plugins and packages already pre-built for you. You need to add this in your dependencies. So if I go back, add it to my perfect YAML, so there's this a dependency. Right now, what I will do is just go back and paste this line and remove the quotes, and this should be good. So once I save it, you see that there's a Flutter pub get running. So when you add any new dependencies, it will automatically check if it's compatible or if you have given the correct version. And if you go to output, you would see that it has done so. It's currently not showing me why, but if everything works fine, you'll get an exit 0. That means yeah, you have successfully installed it correctly. I think maybe my emulator is running, that's why, but I don't know. Okay, so like if you have successfully installed it, you will be able to import it as well. So let's go ahead and try it. So you need to import this particular line, which is already present in the documentation. Very important, you should always read it. I'll be going at the top and importing this line. So it currently says that imported package is unused import. So that means it's actually imported, but it's currently not in use, which means it has successfully installed. So to be able to install that, and all this has happened while I'm not even like closing the application. So to actually use it, I'm gonna wrap everything in an expanded icon. Now expanded is something like you can get it by the name that we want to have an expanded widget, which can like basically div, which can wrap everything inside of it and make a scrollable view. So I don't want the entire application to scroll when my list and the gallery list grows. I want only this particular area to re-render. So I want to create a child called and have it a padding. I basically want to create a padding because I want some spacing from the top and bottom. So I can give it a padding of the same thing. I'll just copy this. So where is it? Yeah, I'll just copy this. Okay. I want to give it a padding of constant padding, and the vertical, I want to give it 18, but I don't want any from the horizontal end. So that's what I want. And after this, I can not found. Okay, let me just hot restart it again. And there you go. So like you see that there was a problem hot reloading it, but once I hot restarted it, everything in the widget rebuilt itself, so it found itself. It found the import. Otherwise, it wasn't able to find it. So after the padding, I would like to have a child inside the padding. Basically, the child will be this staggered grid view, and it's staggered grid view dot count builder, which is this one. Now this is what came with the plugin which I installed. So let me just move it to this side. But there's a lot of things going on. So like the staggered grid view, the count builder has basically cross-axis item builder and staggered tile builder. So these are the necessary things which you need to give it. So I can say that I want the axis count to be 2. So I want 2 items at max in the horizontal level. I don't want 3, 4 images. I want 2 images in the horizontal level and not more than that. The second one, cross-axis spacing, I can give it 12, and the main axis also 12. So these are numbers you can play around with. There is what problem? Oh, not item builder. It should be cross-axis builder. Cross-axis spacing. Axis spacing, and the main axis spacing, not the builder's main axis spacing. Yeah, should be good to go now. Now if I save it, yeah, got pretty formatting and everything is out of space again. So let me just, yeah, so whenever you do a builder, you need to specify what should be the total item count. So right now the item count is the amount of items I have in my list of images. So the item count can be item count, item, not builder, item count. Item count is actually img dot length. So whatever, how many objects or how many strings I have, links I have in the image array, that will be the length of the whole builder. And the item builder actually takes a context and the index. So I would need the index in order to render the individual uh, images, basically. So inside of the index item builder, I would return a container. So this is what I'm specifying, that individual images. So this is what, like, in the item builder, I'm like getting inside of the individual images, and like I'm setting properties of how individual images should look right now. So for example, I can give it a child of clip r rectangle. Now what this is if I do not give it, like, let me show you what happens if I don't. So I can just render a child of image dot network, and the reason I'm doing image.network and not image.asset, there's also an option called asset, because I'm fetching the network images, since these are all unsplash images and they need network, so I need an HTTPS call. That's why I'm using image.network. And in here, I can just say it's actually img and the index of the, like, the in particular index inside of this img list. So it'll render all this like in a loop. After I render this, I can say a fit, and the fit will be box fit dot fill. It's like a fill property that the images should fill and not contain or tile itself. And there's also one property which is required, which is the where is it? Like, where am I closing it? Yeah, right here. So there's this staggered tile builder, which takes an index. This is a required property without which you won't be able to create the staggered grid view. So you can return new staggered tile.count. I'm going to give it a cross-axis cell count of 1, and the main axis cell count is something, this is like, you can do index that is even. So if your index is even, you can give it a count of 1.2 or 2. So this is like a fancy way of creating the designs. Okay, so there's a, okay, sorry for that. It should work fine if I do refresh. Yeah, there you go. So you have all these different images, but if you take a look at the images, they are rectangular and they are not the same way which is there in the repo. So you have a border radius as like a curve there. So in order to do that, in order to tamper with any kind of a rectangle, what you need to do is I'll be wrapping this image thing in a new widget, which is clip r rect. So I can do clip r rect, and what this clip r rect does is you can basically play around with any of the inner properties of a rectangle with clip r rect. So you can clip the rectangle and create your own shapes out of it. So I can do a border radius of circular, and then I can do 8, and that's all. And now yeah, there you go. So if I do a 20, you would see that it has a lot more border radius than it normally does. So I will just give it a subtle 8. And let me just refresh the entire thing so that the debug console looks nice. And yeah, that's about it. So that's how you basically create an application, and it was just in 15 or 20 minutes, I believe. You just got this whole application running in, like, I think 15 minutes. So this is very, if I click on it, you get this. Yeah. So that's working fine, and yeah, I'm happy with it. Okay, so is there anything left? I think it's good enough. And yeah, so if you want to change anything, you can just go ahead and give your own pictures or something. Like, you can tamper with it, There's also one thing which I was playing around with, like you can actually tamper with these values. So like if it's even, you can give it a 4, and then these are the widths, the ratio of the images will change basically. So this is like a, yeah, you could have given it 1 1 basically. It'll be same for all the images. It'll be like a square box. So this is like a basic grid view. But if you don't want to do it, if you can give a 1 2, but then all the images will be rendered the same way, like having the same height. So that's why I chose something like index that is even and is doing a check. So like it's alternate the other way. Yeah, that's what you can create with Flutter, and that was pretty simple. And now I think Josh can help you get the same design or a similar outline in Xamarin.
Right. Thank you, Sayan.
Yeah,
So maybe you can share the slides.
yeah, sure. Just a second. Yeah, it's visible now.
Okay. Right. So amazing. So I'll be discussing with you more about Xamarin and what Xamarin is. So actually, Xamarin it's also an open source UI framework that allows you to build cross-platform mobile applications for either Android, iOS, or Windows using a shared code base. So what means is like you can be able to write a shared logic in C Sharp, and the shared logic can be accessed across the three different platforms, either iOS, Android, or Windows. And it also provides you a native API access. So for example, if you're on Android, you'll be able to access the native APIs for Android, and you can be able to write specific code specific, can be able to write specific code for a specific platform. So for example, if you want to target specifically Android, you can be able to write code that specifically runs for the Android application. But overall, you can be able to share the business the business logic. You can move on to the next slide. So on the other slide, you've seen the essence of sharing, or rather, how we share the code base. Sharing just the business logic. But some around 2018, uh, Microsoft introduced something known as the Xamarin Essentials. So what Xamarin Essentials is, this is now a UI framework. So where you are able to share not just the code base, but you can be able to share the different APIs and target the three different platforms. So for example, if it's something like let's say something like clipboard, you don't need to implement it three times. You don't need three different libraries for Android, for iOS, or for Windows to do all of that. You can be able to do that directly just using Xamarin Essentials. So that allows you to share um, the UI the UI components also. And Xamarin Essentials has more than 60 APIs that you can be able to leverage, including things like the accelerometer, battery, compass, the gyroscope, and all of that. And you can be able to access all of that just using a single library, because like before then you had to have the library for maybe for managing the themes, or for doing something like for managing things like geolocation, and you will do it differently on the three different platforms. But using Xamarin Essentials, you are able to share all of that. Apart from sharing the logic, you're able to actually share these components that target native APIs for these specific platforms. We can move on to the next slide. So we've been able to share the can be able to share the business logic, and we have the components, these API specific components that you can be able to share across the 3 different platforms. Then we introduce something known as Xamarin.Forms. Before that, I just showed you the architecture on which Xamarin lands. That's the shared code base, and now Xamarin Essentials. But introducing Xamarin.Forms, now this is where you're able to share the UI. You just define your UI in one single place, and you're able to run it across the three different platforms. You can actually be able to build a complete mobile application without writing any Android specific code or any Windows or iOS specific code. So building Xamarin.Forms, you mainly use C#. So that's the language you use for building Xamarin.Forms applications. And I guess the best way for me to explain all of this is by walking you through the structure of a Xamarin.Forms. I didn't prepare slides. I just wanted to do a live demo of explaining everything in the Xamarin.Form, how everything is structured in Xamarin.Forms. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can show you exactly how this is done. So let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen. Yes.
All right. So I'm using Visual Studio 2019 for building a Xamarin.Forms project. So to create a Xamarin.Forms app, you just go to File, then let's create a new project, and then I'll specify it's a Xamarin.Forms application. Next, then you can give it a name, specify, and then I'm going to create. Then you can be able to choose the starting template, either master detail, tabbed, a shell, or a blank. And you can be able to see, you can specify the platforms you want to target, whether Android, iOS, or UWP. UWP basically runs on Windows 10. So then once you've selected your template, you can be able just to hit OK, and it's going to create one. So I'm not going to do that because we've already created this project. Okay. I guess I need to reopen it. So let me open a project that I had created. And so basically this is the structure of the Xamarin.Forms. This is Xamarin.Forms project layout. So we have the solution that holds the different projects in the solution. So we have you can see the project name is called list view grid layout. And so this is like the PCL. This is where all the logic is shared from, and I'll be talking much more about these. And then we have the Android project, the iOS project. If I had selected also to create for a Windows project, you could have seen the Windows project right in here. And so mainly with Xamarin.Forms, as I said, we share a lot of the business logic. And so much of the stuff happens in this PCL here. So, and the starting point of the application is from this app.xaml. So this is the starting point. This is the starting point of the application, where I specify the main page to load will be this main page. And you can see, yeah, it's the main page. So when building building a Xamarin application, to build your UI, we normally use XAML. If you've heard of XAML, so like for example in Android, it's normally used as XML, but mainly in Xamarin.Forms we use XAML. And basically, if you've interacted with UWP, WPF, or any other desktop application, developing desktop applications, you might have interacted with XAML, but it's not the same. It's not the exact same XAML as in UWP or Windows Forms. or WPF, it's different, but basically some of the rules apply, like things like data binding and all those basic rules they apply. So basically this is how we specify our UI. I'll be coming into details about that. And so you can define everything here, and the only thing you need to do so that this project can run on either Android, iOS, or a Windows application is just by including this project in the subsequent in these other in the Android project. So if I was to come under references, you can be able to see I have you can be able to see I have this one, list view grid layout. So this project here, which is the Xamarin.Forms project that has everything, uh, is imported on the Android and also on the iOS project as a reference. And actually for this project, I haven't implemented anything native for Android. As you can see, it's just empty because everything else is done from the list view from the Xamarin.Forms application. So I'm going to run these, then I can explain the code base. So I'm just going to build fast. Oh, I have to share my desktop so that you can see it running on the emulator. So let me stop sharing, then share again. Let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
No, it's not up yet.
Or about now?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, so I've deployed. So this is just a simple gallery application. I'm using the Syncfusion library to do that easily. So basically, the images are grouped in terms of the images. We have the title, photos, and then the images are grouped according to the time they were created. So for example, you can see images created 2 weeks ago like that, and you can be able to select and maybe do something like a delete. So yeah, so basically this is the simple application which we're working on. Yeah, so just to show you how it works, actually everything I've just specified everything in this one file because it's only one page, so it's only the main page only. So what we have a content page, and then inside the content page we have the grid. So this grid houses everything else. So it's the one that is housing all the grid view that has the gallery inside of it. So we normally create the pages. So all of these screens, they are defined as pages, and we normally define the pages. We have different types of pages. It was just to show you a few of them. So you can see we have different types of pages. We have a content page, a content view, a list view page, a tabbed page, and things like that. And the reason as why I'm actually bringing these up is because maybe you've never used Xamarin before, but you're good in C Sharp. You can actually build the whole UI without using XAML and just using C Sharp. So if you are just to create a content page C Sharp, it doesn't create the XAML file. It just creates the C Sharp, a C Sharp file, which you can be able to define the UI in C Sharp. One of the challenges in doing that is you might not be able to visualize your changes on the preview as you work on that. So, but basically you can actually use you can create the XAML, and once you create a page using XAML, it normally creates both the XAML file and the code behind file, which is in C Sharp. Like for example, we have the main page.xaml here, and we have the main page.xaml.cs, which is now a C Sharp file inside here. And as you can see, this C Sharp file doesn't have much. We only define a constructor. That's the only thing that we define, a constructor that only specifies the the sizes of the grid layout, or rather the grid view. So that's the only thing that happens. So you may be wondering, where does all the other logic come from? Where am I loading all the images from? And so I'm using an architecture pattern known as mvvm. Maybe you've heard about mvvm, which is the model view model uh, architecture, where I specify, where I'm able to decouple my application, so that the view, in this case where the view is this main page.xaml, is not tightly coupled with the logic, in such a way that even if I make changes to the view, the logic remains unchanged. And so as you can see, so that's what we call the view model, where all the logic exists. And so as you can see, we have the fields. Let me just expand all these regions. So this is where we define the code, the logic in the view model, and then we have the model, which specifies the kind of information that I'm displaying. So in this case, I'm displaying images, and so I only have properties like the image title, and the created date, and whether it's selected. So those are the only properties I have, and so these are the properties that I'm using. So like for example, when I select these, see when there is a selection, what's this? I'm using the property, the isSelected property. So these are the model that I'm using on my view. So nothing is coupled to the view. So the view, I can make changes to the logic without affecting the view directly, without breaking the code on the view, and I can also make changes to the view without breaking the code on the business logic. So the code is on GitHub, and I guess Sayan will be sharing the link to it. But yeah, that's how Xamarin compares to Flutter.
Yeah, of course. I'll be posting the link as well in the chat, and like everyone can go and take a look at the repo. So the repo has both Flutter and Xamarin inside. Like it has a README with all the description about what the packages and everything we have used, as well as you'll find a separate folder for Flutter as well as Xamarin, so you can take a deep look into each of whichever or both, whatever you want to do. Okay, so let me share my screen back, and this is something I want to do, which is the let's connect screen. Okay, so yeah, so this is my LinkedIn, and this is the handle of Flutter Kolkata. You can go ahead and check Flutter Kolkata out. We are a new community in India, and we are trying to grow, and we are part of Flutter India, and we are trying to grow as much as possible, and we welcome every Flutter enthusiast in our community. I'll also post a link to the Discord channel of the official Flutter Code to the Discord channel below and in the chat, and you guys can join in. And below that is the LinkedIn handle of Josh, so you guys can go and check Josh out. Apart from that, thank you. I hope you guys learned something new in this session, and you guys can at least get ground level view of what is going on, what are the differences, which platform, or if both, like which what do you want to choose and whatnot, which will help you later in your app development. So yeah, that's I hope we were able to help you understand better, or like help you 10-20% in your app development career. So yeah, thank you for being in this session. Yeah, is there anything anyone would like to add, or else we can close the session?